Have you ever been judged not for what you did, but simply for who you are? So, this story might feel a little too familiar. And if you believe every person deserves equal respect, no matter their skin color or bank balance, hit that subscribe button and tell us where you're watching from. Because what happened on this flight? It didn't just expose bias. It changed the fate of an entire airline. The flight attendant's voice was polished, but her tone held something colder underneath. "There seems to be a mistake, sir," she said. "We're going to need you to move to accommodate one of our VIP passengers." Her smile was forced. Her eyes flicked sideways. The man in question, a tall, sharply dressed black passenger seated in 2A, looked up with a puzzled expression. He had boarded early, paid full fare, booked weeks in advance, and he was, in fact, a platinum member. Still, the flight attendant stood her ground. "This seat is for our platinum elite guests only," she added, her voice tight with implied judgment. Behind her, a well-dressed white woman named Cheryl Whitman was tapping her designer watch, clearly irritated. "That's my seat," Cheryl huffed, loud enough for surrounding passengers to hear. "I always sit there. It's basically mine." The man furrowed his brow but remained calm. He reached into his wallet and handed over his platinum card. "I am a platinum elite," he said evenly, "and this is the seat printed on my ticket." The attendant, Jessica, blinked, surprised for a split second. Then, with practiced composure, she pointed to Cheryl. "Well, Ms. Whitman flies with us often. That seat is usually hers," she said. The message was clear. Status wasn't the issue. Appearance was. Passengers began to shift uncomfortably. A few started whispering. One or two phones were already out, cameras discreetly recording. What Jessica didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this man? He wasn't just another business-class traveler. He was about to turn this moment of discrimination into the biggest wake-up call the airline industry had seen in years. This wasn't just karma. This was karma in first class. Have you ever had someone assume you didn't belong? Just because of how you looked or what you wore? Tell us in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else to speak up. Let's rewind. The man in seat 2A was Marcus Turner, 42 years old, founder and CEO of Veritas Technologies, a $2.8 billion artificial intelligence company. Veritas specialized in ethical AI, tech that actually rooted out bias in customer service systems. Yes, the same kind of bias Marcus was experiencing right now. But Marcus's story didn't begin in boardrooms or private jets. He grew up in Southside Chicago, learning to code at 11 on a beat-up second-hand computer. While other kids played games, Marcus was building them, writing simple programs that, over time, evolved into complex software systems. By 16, tragedy struck. His father was killed in a senseless attack that shook their entire community. Standing at his father's grave, Marcus made a vow to build something that would help the world see people for who they really were, to strip away assumptions, to reveal character over color. He never forgot that promise. For 2 decades, Marcus poured everything into that dream. He started Veritas in a cramped apartment, coding for 18 hours a day, working temp jobs at night to keep the lights on. And earlier that very day, long before the drama on the plane, security cameras had captured Marcus doing what he always did, helping an elderly woman struggling with her bag, holding the door for a family of tourists, thanking cafe workers by name and tipping more than most would consider normal. Not because he had to, because that's who Marcus Turner was. Now he was flying first class to deliver the keynote speech at the Global Ethics and Technology Conference, a summit attended by the world's top CEOs, tech founders, and government officials. He had chosen Skylux Airlines for its reputation, luxury, exclusivity, premium service. Their first-class experience was legendary. Seats that reclined into full beds, champagne on takeoff, personalized menus. And Marcus had chosen seat 2A specifically for its legroom, so he could work comfortably en route. But Skylux had a secret. Behind the leather seats and marble finishes, their systems were crumbling. Outdated software, poor service rankings. They were desperate to modernize, and had recently submitted a proposal to Veritas, hoping to partner with Marcus's company and overhaul their tech. What no one realized, not even Jessica or Cheryl, was that the man they were trying to displace from seat 2A was the very person who held the key to Skylux's future. Jessica, the flight attendant, had worked at Skylux for 8 years. She knew Cheryl Whitman by name, knew she tipped well, and she always made sure Cheryl got her favorite seat. So when Jessica leaned toward Marcus, there was a certain edge to her words, like she expected obedience. "Sir," she said. Would you mind relocating to another seat in first class? Ms. Whitman is one of our loyal flyers. Marcus looked up from his tablet, confused but composed. This is my assigned seat, he replied. I'm a Platinum Elite member as well. Cheryl didn't bother hiding her irritation. I always sit there on this route, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. It's practically reserved for me. And in that moment, as phones quietly recorded and fellow passengers leaned in, no one had any idea what was about to happen next. The cabin grew tense, the mood shifting quickly as eyes turned toward seat 2A. A simple moment had become something else entirely. Passengers watched in hushed silence, some exchanging side glances, others pretending not to look, but all of them aware. Flight attendant Jessica Miller fidgeted where she stood, stealing glances between Marcus Turner and Cheryl Whitman, the entitled passenger still tapping her expensive watch like it was counting down to her rightful throne. Sir, Jessica said again, her words dressed in politeness but her tone anything but. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in another section? Her meaning wasn't hard to decode. She wasn't suggesting another first-class seat. Marcus, still calm, still collected, gave a polite but firm reply. No thank you, he said. I chose this seat for the legroom. I have work to do during the flight. Jessica offered a tight-lipped smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, nodded stiffly, and made her way toward the front of the cabin. But she kept glancing back, like something about Marcus still bothered her. What happened next? It was caught on camera by a passenger seated just across the aisle. And the footage? It would soon explode online. Cheryl stepped forward, pretending to adjust her designer tote in the overhead bin. As she did, she discreetly slipped a folded stack of cash into Jessica's uniform pocket. I appreciate your help with this, Cheryl whispered just loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. Jessica's cheeks flushed. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. In that moment, what looked like a seating disagreement transformed into something darker, a bribe to push out a paying passenger who didn't look the part. The first-class cabin had shifted from luxury to silent judgment. That's when Trevor Manning, the cabin supervisor, appeared. Tall, stiff, wearing the kind of authority that expects to be obeyed. He stopped at Marcus's seat, cleared his throat, and addressed him in a voice loud enough for the entire section to hear. Sir, I need you to move, he said. One of our VIP passengers has requested this seat. There was no question in his voice, only a directive, a warning. Marcus looked up from his tablet, gaze steady. He had heard this tone before. Far too many times. I've shown my boarding pass. I'm a Platinum Elite, Marcus said evenly. And this is my assigned seat. Trevor's jaw tightened. A flicker of frustration twitched in his temple. He leaned down, lowering his voice, but not enough. Several nearby passengers leaned in closer. Maybe you're not familiar with how we operate here, Trevor said, each word slow and condescending. We accommodate our valued flyers. People who fly with us regularly. Who expect certain privileges. By now, nearly everyone in first class was tuned in. A woman across the aisle angled her phone toward the interaction. The red light blinked, recording. Later, that video would rack up over 12 million views. Meanwhile, Cheryl clutched her purse theatrically and let out a loud sigh. I have a meeting the second we land, she said to no one in particular. This is unacceptable. One passenger nearby muttered, he doesn't even look like someone who belongs in first class. Another nodded quietly. Trevor, feeling emboldened, leaned closer to Marcus again. This time his words were barely a whisper, but loud enough to sting. We can do this the easy way, he said, or we can do it the hard way. Your choice. The threat hung in the air like a cloud ready to burst. Most people would have given in. The pressure. The eyes. The possibility of being removed. But Marcus wasn't most people. He looked Trevor straight in the eye and responded with the kind of calm that comes from knowing you have nothing to prove. I'm not moving, he said simply. 6 words. No anger. No fear. Just truth. Trevor's face turned red. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed toward the front of the cabin, grabbing the service phone off the wall. Passengers watched in silence, some whispering, some texting, others openly filming now. And Marcus? He went back to reviewing the keynote presentation he'd be delivering in just a few hours. 5 minutes passed. Then the cockpit door opened. Captain James Reynolds stepped into the aisle, his face carefully composed, professional but visibly annoyed. Behind him followed Trevor and Jessica. The cavalry had arrived. The captain strode down the aisle and stopped next to Marcus, towering over him. Sir, I understand there's been some difficulty, he said. My crew has the authority to reassign seats when necessary for the comfort of all passengers. Marcus looked up. He was outnumbered now, 3 airline employees standing over him, all with forced smiles and false authority. But Marcus remained unmoved. "Captain," he said respectfully, "I have a valid ticket. I booked this specific seat for a reason. I'm a Platinum Elite flyer. There's no airline policy that says I must give it up because someone else wants it." Trevor folded his arms and his lips curled into a smug grin, the kind of expression that says, "I'm going to win this." "Sir," Trevor cut in, "if you refuse to cooperate, we'll have no choice but to remove you from this flight." That landed like a slap. Marcus arched a brow. Come. Unshaken. And now everyone in the cabin leaned in just a little more. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. This was about something bigger. For the first time during the entire exchange, Captain Reynolds showed a genuine flicker of surprise. "You're threatening to remove me?" Marcus Turner asked, his voice edged with disbelief, "because I won't give up the seat I paid for?" The words hung in the air like a live wire. Everyone in the cabin knew what the answer was, but no one dared to say it. Before the captain could respond, Cheryl Whitman injected herself into the moment. Again. "This is outrageous," she declared dramatically, her voice loud enough to echo. "I'm going to miss my connection. I've never been treated this way in all my years of flying." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on the passengers watching the scene unfold. Several of them exchanged looks, disbelief mixed with disgust. The captain, perhaps sensing this was escalating well beyond his control, tried to double down. "This is your final warning," he said, voice tight with authority. "You need to move to another seat or we'll be forced to call security." And that's when Marcus moved, not from his seat but with intention. He calmly reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, pulled out his phone, and unlocked the camera app with steady hands. "I want to be very clear about what's happening right now," Marcus said, his voice level as the camera began to record. "I am being threatened with removal from this aircraft because I won't give up my assigned seat to another passenger who simply prefers it." As he spoke, his camera captured the faces of those standing over him, the captain, Trevor, and Jessica. Trevor's expression contorted with rage. He reached toward the phone, hand outstretched, his professionalism gone. "Recording is not allowed," Trevor barked. "Hand that over." Marcus pulled the phone slightly back, just out of reach. "There is no federal law prohibiting personal recording on a commercial aircraft," he said calmly. "As long as it doesn't interfere with crew duties, I'm within my rights." The knowledge caught Trevor off guard. His hand froze mid-air. He lowered it slowly, his jaw clenched, his expression darkening further. What would you do in Marcus's place? Would you give in or stand your ground? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this story has you gripped, hit that like button and subscribe now. Moments later, heavy footsteps approached from the front of the cabin. 2 airport security officers boarded the plane, their arrival confirming that this had reached a point of no return. The atmosphere in the cabin was thick with tension. Even the quiet hum of the engine seemed to fade as all eyes turned toward Marcus's row. The security officers moved with practiced efficiency, led by Trevor's gesturing hand. Their destination was clear: Seat 2A. Marcus sat upright, his hands resting calmly in his lap, his phone still recording from where it sat on his leg. "Sir," one of the officers began, voice neutral. "We've been informed there's a situation. We're going to need you to step off the aircraft." Marcus gave a single nod, acknowledging the officer. His voice remained calm even as the eyes of the cabin bore into him. "Could you tell me," Marcus asked clearly, "what airline policy I violated?" He looked up, voice measured. "Because I'm sitting in my assigned seat. I'm a Platinum Elite passenger with a valid ticket." The 2 officers exchanged glances. You could see the hesitation in their posture. They weren't used to being called in for this. One officer cleared his throat. "We still need you to come with us," he said, dodging the question. Marcus turned to the captain. "Captain Reynolds," he said directly, "am I being removed for refusing to give up the seat I was assigned to accommodate someone who simply wants it?" The captain didn't flinch, but his voice lost some of its certainty. "You're being removed for creating a disturbance," he replied, though the words sounded hollow even as he said them. A wave of murmurs swept through the cabin. An elderly gentleman near the front shook his head quietly. A young woman too rose back, wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Still Marcus complied. He gathered his belongings with quiet dignity, tablet, notes, briefcase, and rose slowly. Cheryl's satisfaction was obvious. Her smirk had returned. She watched him move like a victor claiming her throne. Serves him right, someone muttered. He didn't look like he belonged anyway. But then a louder voice fired back. He didn't do anything wrong. I'm recording all of this, another passenger added. Marcus walked steadily toward the front, escorted by the officers, not with shame but with resolve. His shoulders were back, his head high, the bearing of a man who had faced this kind of injustice before. As he passed Trevor, something happened that would later become crucial. Cheryl, assuming no one was watching, leaned in close to Trevor and quietly slipped a folded bill into his pocket. Thanks for handling it, she whispered, her voice low but captured on multiple phones. First class should have standards. The words hung in the air like poison. As Marcus stepped off the aircraft, he pulled out his phone again. His fingers flew across the screen as he composed a message to his COO. Elise, I've just been removed from a Skylux flight. They picked the wrong person to humiliate. For most people, that moment would bring anger or shame. But Marcus showed only one thing: focus. He raised his phone to his ear and spoke clearly. Sarah, it's Marcus. Assemble legal. Now, I've just experienced a textbook case of discriminatory removal. We're going to handle this. The security officers remained nearby, increasingly aware that something about this didn't add up. One of them tapped at his tablet, reading through the incident notes. His brows furrowed. Finally, he looked up at Marcus. His voice lower now and much less confident. Sir, he said hesitantly, I think there may have been a misunderstanding here. There appears to have been a misunderstanding, the officer said hesitantly, glancing down at his tablet. The report claims you were being disruptive, but witness statements aren't lining up. Marcus Richardson lowered his phone, locking eyes with the officer. His tone was calm, but carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much of this in his life. There was a misunderstanding, Marcus said, but it wasn't mine. I was sitting in the seat assigned to me with a valid boarding pass and elite status. I was asked to move, not for safety, not for policy, but to satisfy another passenger's preference. When I declined, I was forcibly removed. The two officers exchanged a glance, a flicker of unease passing between them. They had been used, weaponized to enforce someone else's bias. We apologize for the inconvenience, sir, the officer mumbled before turning away, retreating down the terminal like someone escaping a guilty conscience. Marcus didn't flinch. He returned to his phone, opened a voice memo, and began dictating. His voice was clear, deliberate, as he captured every detail. The faces, the language, the body cues, every calculated humiliation. Just then, a young woman approached. She clutched a carry-on bag in one hand and her phone in the other. Excuse me, she said, her voice shaky but determined. I followed you off the plane. I couldn't just sit there and let it happen. Marcus looked up, recognizing her. She'd been seated across the aisle in first class. I recorded everything, she said, holding up her phone. From the moment that flight attendant approached you to the second they forced you out. I also caught it, the moment she slipped him cash. It's all here. She turned the phone, showing him crystal clear footage. Every second of discrimination. Every word. Every bribe. Marcus's face softened, the first real sign of emotion since his removal. Thank you, he said sincerely. That may be more helpful than you know. They exchanged contact information, the woman promising to send the unedited footage right away. What she didn't realize, what none of them could yet imagine, was that within hours her video would explode across the internet. A quiet act of courage would soon become a global headline. Meanwhile, 30,000 feet above, a far different scene was unfolding. Back on board, Cheryl Whitman sat smugly in Marcus's seat, 2A, sipping complimentary champagne, her designer handbag neatly tucked beside her. Her expression said everything: victory, entitlement, and disdain. I'm so sorry for the disruption, Miss Whitman, Jessica the flight attendant said softly, pouring her another glass. We'll make sure the rest of your flight is perfect. Behind the curtain in the galley, Jessica and Trevor huddled out of sight. Trevor pulled a folded stack of bills from his pocket. A quick count revealed the payoff. $200, he whispered. Not bad for a 5-minute shuffle. Jessica smirked. Some passengers know how to show appreciation. Neither of them realized the cost of that tip, because it wasn't $200. It was about to cost them their careers. Suddenly, an urgent page came through the crew's comms. All senior flight crew report immediately. A voice from Skylux's internal operations team crackled through. You've made a mistake. A serious one. One that could jeopardize your jobs. Jessica and Trevor stared at each other, pale, confused. The mood shifted instantly. The power they thought they had? Gone. Who was that man? Trevor whispered. Who did we just kick off our plane? At the same time, across the country, inside the glass-walled executive floor of Skylux Airlines headquarters, CEO Richard Williams was finishing a review of quarterly financials when his phone buzzed with an internal call. Sir, came the voice of the PR director, shaky and urgent. We have a situation. Handle it, Williams said wearily. Passengers get upset all the time. Release the usual statement. Sir, it's not that simple, the voice insisted. A video's going viral. A black man in first class was removed from his assigned seat so a white woman could have it. The video shows our staff accepting money. On camera. Williams sat upright. Send me the video. Now. As he watched the footage, his face drained of color. He saw everything. The bribe, the humiliation, the cold professionalism of a man being unjustly removed, and the contempt in the expressions of his staff. Who is he? Williams asked, barely breathing. Has he been identified? The pause was deafening. Yes, sir. According to the passenger manifest, his name is Marcus Richardson. For a full 5 seconds, the line went silent. Did you say Marcus Richardson? Williams whispered. Yes, sir. The CEO leaned back, face pale, stunned. Marcus Richardson is the founder and CEO of Right Tech Solutions. He's the very person we've been courting for a $50 million tech partnership. The same man who's been quietly buying stock in our company for the last 2 years. Back at a private airport lounge, Marcus sat at the center of a fast-assembling war room. His COO, Elise Thompson, had arrived within 20 minutes, bringing Skylux's worst nightmare with her. Marcus's legal team and corporate communications staff. Laptops were open. Phones buzzed. Screens refreshed with real-time metrics. The video's already at 2.1 million views, reported the communications director, turning the screen toward Marcus. It's being picked up by every major outlet. Fast. Elise looked up from her phone, her eyes meeting Marcus's. They don't know, she said, that we were already auditing their company for the partnership. Marcus gave a faint smile. They just showed us who they really are, and they did it on camera. At Skylux Airlines headquarters, the atmosphere was nothing short of chaos. Screens lined the walls of the media suite, each displaying live analytics of a situation spinning wildly out of control. The hashtag Skylux discrimination was trending nationwide. The video's view count had just surged past 5 million, and now high-profile celebrities were reposting it to their massive audiences. Inside the executive boardroom, CEO Richard Williams stood surrounded by his top brass. Faces were grim. No one spoke unless absolutely necessary. Then a voice broke through the tension. Sir, his assistant said, phone in hand, I have Marcus Richardson's office on the line. He's agreed to speak directly. The room went silent. Williams drew a slow breath, then tapped the speakerphone icon. Mr. Richardson, he said, forcing warmth into his voice, I want to personally extend our sincerest apologies for the inexcusable incident that occurred this morning. Wait, cut in the CFO, flipping through a file he just pulled up. The Marcus Richardson? The tech CEO? Williams gave a silent nod, confirming their worst fears, and bracing for impact. Marcus's voice came through the speaker, calm and composed, yet carrying a gravity that made the air feel heavier. Mr. Williams, he said evenly, I appreciate you reaching out. As you may already know, my company owns approximately 25% of Skylux Airlines shares. And when you combine that with the holdings of our strategic partners, that's a controlling interest. A hush fell over the room. Board members exchanged panicked looks as the full scope of the situation began to dawn on them. I'm calling for an emergency shareholder meeting, Marcus continued. What happened today has raised serious concerns about Skylux's leadership, culture, and its commitment to equity. And just like that, the meeting was set, with record-breaking urgency. Hours later, the Skylux boardroom was filled to capacity. Some directors arrived in golf clothes, others with hair still damp from family pool parties, all summoned without warning. The atmosphere was tense. No one said much. They were all waiting for the man whose presence now held the future of their airline in his hands. When Marcus Richardson entered, it was like a switch flipped. The room fell dead silent. Despite the morning's injustice, he walked in with the calm authority of a man who knew his value. He wore the same navy suit he'd been wearing when they kicked him off the plane, a subtle, pointed reminder of what had occurred. At his side were his COO, Elise Thompson, the chief legal counsel, and 2 senior executives who would later play a pivotal role in what came next. Williams dimmed the lights and tapped the remote. On the massive screen behind him, the viral video played in full HD. Every painful detail. The smug dismissal by Trevor. The weak, corporate script of Captain Reynolds. The bribe, not once but twice, exchanged like pocket change. When it ended, the room was frozen in 30 seconds of silence. Not one board member could meet Marcus's gaze. Williams finally cleared his throat. "Mr. Richardson," he began carefully, "please accept our deepest apologies for—" "I'm not here for apologies," Marcus interrupted, voice steady and sharp. "I'm here for accountability." That one sentence sliced through the boardroom like glass. Shifting in their seats, the directors quickly realized, standard PR spin wouldn't save them now. "As your largest individual shareholder," Marcus continued, "I have two items on the table, one demand and one decision. 1. Every staff member involved in this incident is terminated immediately. 2. I'm canceling the $50 million partnership we were negotiating, effective now." Williams flinched. He turned toward the others for backup, voice tentative. "Mr. Richardson, perhaps a suspension would suffice? Some of these employees have long tenure and we do have union." "This isn't a negotiation," Marcus said flatly. "It's a choice. Do what's right, or I pull my investment and dump 25% of your stock by end of business." Gasps echoed around the room. The gravity was crystal clear. Losing Marcus wouldn't just hurt Skylux, it would kill it. Right on cue, the boardroom doors burst open. A financial analyst, barely out of breath, tablet in hand, rushed in. "Sir," he called out, ignoring protocol. "News of the incident is already crashing our stock. We're down 12% and falling. Analysts say if we don't act now, we could hit a 30% drop by close of market." Williams stared at the tablet, then up at Marcus. There was no way out. He knew it. The board knew it. And Marcus? He had known it the moment they'd escorted him off that plane. 3 floors below, in a windowless HR conference room, Trevor, Jessica, and Captain Reynolds sat in silence. Each of them had been summoned without context, though by now they had a sinking suspicion. Whispered rumors had started spreading like wildfire. At exactly 4:30 p.m., the HR director entered the room, flanked by legal counsel and 2 security officers who took silent positions by the door. This wasn't a performance review. It wasn't even a disciplinary warning. It was judgment. The HR director placed 3 folders on the table. Identical. Final. "I'll be direct," she said. "Your employment with Skylux Airlines is terminated, effective immediately." The HR director's words landed like a punch to the gut. Effective immediately. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Trevor's face twisted in disbelief, eyes wide with indignation. Captain Reynolds simply closed his eyes, and for the first time looked like a man completely defeated. "We were just following procedure," Trevor blurted, his voice rising. "That passenger was difficult. He disrupted the boarding process." But the HR director didn't even flinch. She opened her laptop and silently turned the screen toward them. There it was, the video, now viral, now undeniable. Trevor's condescending tone. Jessica's visible discomfort. The captain's silent complicity. And then the part that drained the color from Trevor's face, the moment Karen slipped cash into his pocket. Her voice was audible even in a whisper, "First class should have standards." The HR director didn't blink. "Was accepting a bribe from a passenger to discriminate against another your definition of procedure?" she asked, her tone cutting through the room like a razor. Jessica broke down. Tears streamed down her face. "I knew it was wrong," she whispered. "Even as it happened. I didn't stop it." Captain Reynolds, a man who had guided planes through storms and emergencies, now looked as fragile as paper. "I trusted my crew's judgment," he said weakly. "I wasn't there for the start." The HR director folded her hands calmly. "You didn't just fail the company," she said. "You failed a human being. A paying customer. A man who, incidentally, is the CEO of Right Tech Solutions and our largest individual shareholder." Another blow. A bigger one. Jessica cried harder. Trevor's face turned pale. "You will be escorted to retrieve your belongings," the HR director continued. "Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks severance. Which, frankly, is generous, given the circumstances." As they were led from the room, the 3 former employees tasted the same humiliation Marcus had endured just hours earlier. Symmetry. Cruel. Fitting. Final. Elsewhere in the building, a very different kind of gathering. The main auditorium of Skylux HQ was packed. Hundreds of employees sat in hushed silence. On stage stood CEO Richard Williams, flanked by Marcus Richardson and his executive team. "Today," Williams began, his voice echoing through the space, "we failed. Not just one passenger, but ourselves. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was the result of deep-rooted flaws in our corporate culture, and starting now, that ends." He gestured to Marcus, who stepped forward with quiet authority. "This isn't about punishment," Marcus began. "This is about transformation." Pause. "It wouldn't have mattered if I were a teacher, a doctor, a student. What happened was wrong, because it happens to people without power every single day. And that ends now." The room was silent. Some nodded. Others looked down, ashamed. But everyone listened. Then Williams dropped the final announcement. "Starting tomorrow," he declared, "all flights, all routes, all services are grounded for 48 hours. You could hear the gasp ripple through the crowd. In that time, every single Skylux employee, from the CEO to the baggage crew, will complete mandatory anti-bias training, developed and led by Marcus's team at Right Tech Solutions. A company-wide shutdown, costing millions. But the message? Priceless. This wasn't damage control. It was a hard reset. And Marcus, standing beside the CEO, could see it clearly on the faces before him. Recognition. Realization. A reckoning. In the weeks that followed, Skylux underwent a transformation unlike anything in its 30-year history. Boardrooms were converted into training spaces. Flight schedules rewritten. Uniforms hung in closets while staff from every department, ground crews, call centers, pilots, executives, filed into classrooms. But this wasn't a checkbox seminar. It was immersive, uncomfortable, necessary. Simulated passenger scenarios. Live feedback from behavioral psychologists. AI-led modules designed to confront unconscious bias and change it. Marcus personally visited dozens of sessions. He stood in front of rooms filled with skeptical, sometimes defensive employees, not as a shareholder but as a witness. "This is your chance to be part of the solution," he told them. "What happened to me happens to people every day, people without a camera, without legal teams, without shareholders to back them. Today we start changing that." And he meant it. Some staff were moved. Some were shaken. But many, maybe most, were changed. This wasn't about retribution. It was about reformation. And outside Skylux's polished walls, the consequences continued. In an industry where reputation is everything, the names Trevor, Jessica, and Captain Reynolds had become synonymous with discrimination in uniform. Trevor sat alone in his apartment, the glow from his laptop casting shadows across a pile of rejection emails. Each one polite. Each one devastating. "Thank you for applying. At this time, we've decided to move forward with other candidates." Translation. You're that guy from the viral video. Jessica's experience was no different. 8 years of service, gone in an instant. In one interview that had seemed promising, everything changed with a single question. "Aren't you the flight attendant from that discrimination incident?" The interview ended moments later. Captain Reynolds, with 30 years of flying under his belt, couldn't even land a job training new pilots. His decades in the air? Reduced to those few minutes of silence, when he failed to do the right thing. And then there was Karen Whitfield. Her fall was even more public. Skylux issued her a lifetime ban, but her punishment extended beyond just losing her preferred airline. On national news, her name became a punchline. On social media? A meme. Airline Karen. Her employer placed her on leave. Friends distanced themselves. And for the first time, Karen had to reckon with what entitlement looks like in the mirror. Meanwhile, things inside Skylux Airlines were changing, fast. New rules. New policies. Zero tolerance for discrimination. No more gray areas, no more second-guessing. And if you think passengers didn't notice? "Oh, they noticed," said one frequent flyer caught on camera at the gate. "They used to treat you different depending on how you looked. But now, it actually feels fair." Another added, "I had an issue with my seat. They handled it with professionalism. No attitude. No drama. It felt respectful." And that's when Marcus began to slowly rebuild his investment. But only after the changes were verified by independent auditors. Skylux stock began to recover, not from luck but from hard-earned trust. Airplane departure and then something no one saw coming. 6 months after the incident that nearly destroyed an airline, Marcus Richardson stepped to a podium on a rainy Tuesday morning to announce something bold. A new initiative. A new beginning. A program called the Second Chance Project. Designed for people who had lost their jobs due to bias-related misconduct, The program offered rehabilitation, training, and a path back to employment. Marcus explained it simply. Accountability doesn't mean a lifetime sentence. It means owning your mistake, doing the work, and earning your way back. We can't build a better world if we don't believe in redemption. Among the first enrollees? Trevor, Jessica, Captain Reynolds. The journey was anything but easy. The program didn't just give them a checklist. It made them face their own reflection. Trevor, the most resistant at first, underwent the biggest transformation. I didn't think I was biased, he admitted one day in a raw group session. I didn't use slurs. I didn't think I hated anyone, but I've come to see how deep this stuff runs. The truth? I never questioned the beliefs I was raised with, until they cost me everything. Jessica learned the weight of silence. I knew what was happening was wrong, she shared through tears. But I stayed quiet because I didn't want to lose my job. I see now, that silence? It was complicity. Captain Reynolds, older and more rigid, had to rewrite what he thought he knew about fairness. I trusted the chain of command, he said quietly. But in doing so, I ignored the human being sitting right in front of me. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. Certificates in hand, Trevor and Jessica began applying for work again, this time including their story as part of their resume. Not an excuse. Not a spin. Just the truth, and the growth that followed. Jessica was the first to get a job. Not in the air but on the ground, as a crew member for a regional carrier. Lower pay, harder work, but a real second chance. Trevor followed a month later. He started in baggage handling, grateful for every suitcase he lifted. Captain Reynolds never returned to the cockpit. But he found purpose as an instructor in the Second Chance program, helping others confront the choices he once ignored. Meanwhile, back at Skylux, the transformation was real. Auditors confirmed what passengers already knew. Customer satisfaction across all demographics had reached an all-time high. For the first time in the industry, Black, Hispanic, and Middle Eastern passengers reported treatment equal to or better than their white counterparts. A metric that should have always been standard, but never was. In a private meeting at Skylux headquarters, Marcus sat across from CEO Richard Williams. Williams handed him the 6-month progress report. Marcus flipped through it, then quietly closed the folder. "You've made real change," he said. "That deserves recognition." Williams gave a weary nod. Lines of stress etched deeper across his face than 6 months before. "It wasn't easy," he admitted, "but it was necessary. What happened to you made us face truths we'd buried for years." Marcus extended his hand. "Change rarely starts with comfort," he said. "It starts with confrontation." They shook hands. Not quite friends, but no longer adversaries. Partners, in rebuilding a company and reshaping an industry. And maybe that's what justice really is. Not just about punishment, but progress. Real, uncomfortable, lasting. Because sometimes, the greatest second chance is the one we choose to give, even after everything. What would you have done in Marcus's shoes? Could you forgive and move forward? Or would you have walked away and watched them fall? Drop your thoughts below. And if you believe stories like this can change the way we think, treat each other, and grow, hit that like and subscribe.